It's what I go around doing is like I really want to bring what is done in professional sports and make it accessible to the junior high school athlete, make it accessible to the physical therapist, to the athletic trainer, to the strength coach who are, working with the mere mortals at the high school level, and take this information and go, all right, well, it always seems so like far out for me, or so distant, unachievable, because there was so much, right? 500 shots a day, if you, and so it is these same fundamentals. It develop their strength, develop their body weight competency, develop load competency, and let's do that and do that quickly.
Today, we're unlocking the secrets of peak athletic performance with a fellow PT. His work spans from the classroom to the show, man, the major leagues, changing, revolutionizing how athletes soar beyond their limits, or what they thought their limits might have been, and how people can elevate their game through systematic testing and interventions. Welcome, Phil Plisky. Phil, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Wow, I can't wait to hear who this guy is, because that was really neat.
He's coming up after you, but thanks for opening for that.
Good, you're right.
Some people bag on like the internet and social media, but I find if you look for the signal amongst the noise, you find people doing great things over and over again. But they have to sort of communicate it well. And I think that's what you did. I don't know what it was when I first connected with you or found something you did, but it was over repetition, right? Like, if you have a kid and you're like, clean your room, usually it's not the first time you tell them, or if someone wants you to buy their cereal or their car, it's this repeated communication over and over and over again. And I think that was the vibe. We talked about this before we hit record, this asymmetrical relationship where I was like, feel like I kind of figure out what this guy's into. He's about doing the right things over and over and over and over and over again. And then magically getting a great result. So thanks for doing it and communicating it over and over and over again. So that's
interesting you say that, because I find like that really took me a long time to get to. I really was so hesitant. I think it was actually my doctor of science training. Like, you are beat into, like, you have to prove everything you say, and you're going to be criticized for everything you say, and all this kind of stuff. So I think that actually set me back like 10 years in my career. I mean, obviously it launched me into doing a lot of different research and stuff like that, but it set me back from publicly sharing the passion I have. And finally, when I got over that, and just, I think that repetition was key. Just like, hey, this is what I think will change the world, and here we go.
I think that's an important message. I mean, I think we're 2 minutes into recording this episode, but so my sort of career, I mentioned it before we hit record, radio broadcaster, saw the iPhone, saw the internet, and I was like, I don't think radio is going to be the thing that I wanted it to be, or the thing I needed it to be. So I went back to PT school. Then I get in front of people like yourself, or people who were just a few weeks ago at CSM and presenting. I'm like, this is awesome. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. Look at all this stuff, this person, all years it took this person to learn it. Days, weeks, months to put the presentation together in front of a few dozen, 100, maybe 1,000 people, and then we leave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but look at all those thousands of hours of pieces of information that could help everybody. Where's the camera? Where's the microphone? So people tell me, people are like, oh, you were so bold to step outside your comfort zone and interview people. I was like, dude, that was my comfort zone.
This is where I live. Like, this is my fun, right?
The outside the comfort zone was physical therapy or healthcare or any of those things. So to hear how long do you think it took you to go from wanting to, or feeling like you had something to share, to actually doing it, and then feeling comfortable about doing it? And maybe you're not even comfortable about it. I mean, like,
I would say to share in private audiences, and like CSM, like I actually, started my career. I remember being a student going to CSM. I spent the first almost 20 years of my career at CSM, and I just wanted to be that guy that was up there presenting. That's all I ever wanted to be. And I got to that, and I felt actually relatively good about that and could do that. But something about sharing on the internet, something about sharing publicly, where it was kind of recorded forever, and this thing felt a lot different. And so I would honestly say that took me about almost 20 years actually into my career to feel comfortable with that. And probably in the past 18 months, like a switch has flipped with me, that it's just like, hey, here it is, here we go. And hey, I know some people aren't going to like it. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to criticize it, but I've got a bigger mission than that criticism.
Good. I wanted you to say that. I was hoping that was the answer, or there was something in there for you. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
It's for the person listening right now who's like, I kind of got that thing, because that's a long time. That's a lot of missed opportunities in terms of people learning from you. And this is simple, but not easy. It's not easy to put yourself out there, because I do it myself, man. I've done 1,200 episodes of a podcast. I was live on the radio 6 days a week for 12, 15 years, and it doesn't go away. It's not easy.
No.
But it's a bell curve, I think. There are people who are on the right side who are always going to love you, no matter what you do. People all the way on the left who are never going to love you. They're going to hate you. I think you have a jump ball for the people in the middle.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's interesting. I'm blessed to be able to work with literally the best rehab and strength and conditioning professionals in the world. Like not just the people who are in pro sports, but the people who are the best in pro sports. So we're talking 0.01% type people. What's interesting about them to me is they all possess these two qualities. It is, number one, they're humble beyond all belief.
Yes.
They actually don't believe that they know a lot.
Yeah.
They're like, truly, like, it's like, there's so much I don't know. And then the other thing is they're crazy passionate about learning more and being curious and constantly doing that. And when you combine those two things, it's kind of interesting. I look at the people who are prolific on the internet, like that started off prolific, like right from the beginning of their career. And it is almost somewhat suspect, actually, because it's just like, I don't know. I don't have that gear. I don't have that DNA to be able to like, hey, I got this from the beginning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not all the time. This isn't foolproof. But when I approach someone after sort of just watching what they do or hearing about them or reading a book or whatever, video, anything, it's not foolproof. But when I say, hey, would you like to come on a podcast and share? When super smart people, I don't know if I have anything to add.
Right.
That's what I'm like, okay, we got something here.
This is going to be good here.
Now I got a match of really great information and humility. But the funny part is, if the humility probably contributed to that great information, is because they never felt full. Right. In terms of like, I always feel like, what was that? Every time you figure out something, you realize, oh, there's 10 more things I don't know. Let's go learn those 10 things. And
it always sounded so cliche to me, though. Like it was always like, oh, I don't know a lot and all this kind of stuff. But man, it took me a while to truly realize how much I didn't know, and being around more people who had that authentic humility of, I would ask these strength coaches, literally best in the world strength coaches, and I would say, I'm designing this program. What do you think of this? And they're like, well, your program's way better than mine. And I'm like, what? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, how could you, they're like, oh, I might change this thing in yours, but I actually like yours better than what I've been doing. I'm like, you're the best of the best. And you're saying that mine, you found value in mine. Like, but they have that curiosity, that humility to just go with it.
It's that psychological thing of like, well, if it feels weird to trust the person who's super confident, who, like you said, comes out of the gates and like, I'm the best. But also it's like, well, they must be, because they're saying it because they believe it. And then the true humble people spent the time, and they are, but they're the least likely to raise their hand to do something.
Right. And you talk about social media from that perspective, right? What gets the attention, right? It's the person who's just willing to put their chest borderline crazy stuff out there is way more interesting than the stuff that works.
Or repeating the good information over and over and over again, but that takes time, effort, and also humility, even doing a little bit. All right. I didn't know we were going to go in this direction.
I didn't either. That's great.
All right. So we start things off. Hard questions, get out of the way first, Phil. So we'll do our first round. So 3 questions brought to you by our friends. One of the smartest guys I know around BFR is Johnny Owens and Owens Recovery. So 3 questions real quick. If you help people master things, skills, sports, if you could instantly, at the snap of a thumb, master any skill or sport, something you do not have a mastery over now, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh.
You could just do it. Snap of a thumb, no effort required.
No effort required. I think, man, I think it would be my athleticism, like literally, like snap of the thumb athleticism. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's also not easy, and smart move, because athleticism crosses all domains.
Right.
All domains.
Right. Yeah. If I'm in a street fight or in a baseball game, like athleticism wins.
So you looked at it. You took it in a direction I didn't know. I like that. Second question. Looking back on your career, what's a piece of advice you wish you had gotten earlier and actually taken to heart? Is there like a lesson that you're like, gosh, I wish I learned this earlier. Hey, where are you going with your PT career? That's not rhetorical. I want to know. Would you like to embark on an extraordinary patient care adventure? That's what they call it. Some people might call it travel therapy. Find out more at jacksontherapy.com. This is perfect for physical therapists who are eager to make their mark. Discover where your skills can take you at jacksontherapy.com with Jackson Therapy Partners. And here's a question for you. You frustrated with your EMR? Feel like it should do more, be easier? Yeah. Take the next step. Maybe try something new. How about an EMR that's all in one? Seamless integrations of patient portals, marketing automations, and billing, all at an unbeatable value. Plus, switching over is a breeze. See what you can do with MW Therapy and their all-in-one EMR at mwtherapy.com. And how would you like to boost your bottom line and help more people? You can do both of those things without having to work more. Smarter, not harder, kids. Boost your clinic's revenue by $290 per patient per quarter by adding remote therapeutic monitoring. You've heard about it, but you're like, I don't know where to get started. Is it complicated? Well, what if you knew where to get started and it wasn't complicated? That's what Physiotech is here for. Kickstart your RTM at physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca right now with Physiotech.
The one thing that it took me way too long to learn is first of all, come up with, understand your own values, your own passions. And one of them that I learned late in my career in working with one of my mentors, Greg Cook, in developing performance testing. We did a lot of development of performance testing together, and we had a blast doing it. And it caused me to realize that I love collaborative creation. And what does that mean? Like, it's like if you do things in a silo, if you do things by yourself, it's hard. And I know not everybody's totally cut out to work with others, but I'm kind of somewhat of, believe it or not, an antisocial person. Like, I don't like making conversation. I don't like, that type of thing. But man, when you can do things together, collaborate and work with others, that is actually where the real magic happens. That's where the fun happens.
I agree. But it takes stepping up and saying, hey, can we collaborate?
Yes.
Hey, I think I have enough value to bring to this for us to work together.
Yeah.
And that's simple, but not necessarily easy. But that I agree with that. That is where the magic it is for me. Also, understanding what the magic is for you, whoever you are.
Personally,
that's terribly important. If you don't like this, don't do it because you see 15 other people doing it. In fact, self-assessment. This was the thing I hated in PT school. It was like reflection.
Yeah.
That's actually
they knew something.
It's right? really valuable. But who the hell had 3 minutes to rub together to reflect in PT school?
No doubt.
Third question for the first round. Aside from your current profession and what you do, if you could jump into any other career, what would it have been? Is there any other career that you looked at from afar and said, I wish this was something I did?
Early on, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Yeah. I just thought those people were cool. Like, those guys are really, really cool to be able to do that. So yeah, I think I would want to do that.
All right. Being a Top Gun, man. I verbatim as a 14-year-old kid could tell you every word from Top Gun.
For
just
sure.
Before they said it.
Absolutely. Right. It's just cool. I mean, it's just cool.
It is just cool. All right. You're off the hot seat. That's 3 questions again from our friends at Owens Recovery Science. Find them online at owensrecoveryscience.com. So you sort of had this idea or this thing, which was like combine testing, right? Mm-hmm. It's simple, right? We see it on TV. In fact, it used to never be on TV. And then it was the combine was on at like 3 a.m. or whatever. And now it's not only a thing that's like featured for the NFL, it's like an event. They are covering it. People can tell 40 times at ball. Oh, this guy drafted this year from this school. He ran a blah, 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 40. So your journey into getting into like sort of combine testing, how'd you start doing it? Why is it a good idea? Why should people do it? I actually pitched it at one of my first bosses in PT, out of PT school. I said, we should do it because it plays on a few psychological attributes to get people into the clinic. The clinic was very sports-based.
How do I compare to everybody else? Competition. Yes. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It actually first started in I'm a physical therapist, athletic trainer. And nothing frustrated me more early on in my career than doing pre-participation physicals. And it was an absolute waste of time.
Yeah.
So we would spend these hours, testing and doing a Lockman on someone's knee and testing hamstring length and doing all this kind of stuff. And I would get done with that. I'm like, we did nothing to help these people. We checked a form. We fulfilled an insurance requirement. We
Ah.
fulfilled some sort of state requirement, but we did nothing to help these athletes. So that's really where it started at was with high school and collegiate pre-participation physicals. It just felt useless actually.
So I pitched it to my first boss and I said, listen, the combine, I think there's 13 tests or something like 12 or 13 tests in the NFL combine.
Okay, right.
My pitch was this similar. So I think we arrived at like a similar idea, but in different ways, right? Which is, okay, that those are all really good I'm using air quotes, good measures to figure out who's better at what in football. What
Right.
if we created our own mini combine and said, I've got a volleyball player coming in tomorrow, or as a great way to get someone into your clinic to experience what working with you would look like, come in, we're going to do this free assessment, but not just passive hamstring length or whatever. Remember the presidential fitness test we took?
Oh yeah.
I don't understand why me sitting with a V sit and reach was important to the president, but he wanted
but
me
he cared. I know he cared. I know he looked at my score.
So my pitch was create 5 tests. I wanted to keep it simple on one hand. 5 tests that we could do in clinic, had to be feasible, that would test a volleyball player, right? So what are the things that are important? And I picked volleyball because I had someone on my schedule and I didn't really know. I was like, well, I sort of know how volleyball works, but what would I test if I only had 5? And we came up with like these couple different tests. And then I said, well, what if we did that for every volleyball player that came in? And we could randomize or give them numbers, and then we could compare them. And I could see where I rank, because when I was done playing Pac-Man as a kid, I wanted to see where my score fell on that high score thing. And then I could also compare me to other people, but I could compare me to me. Because if I wanted to be better at volleyball or ice hockey, if I did these 5, you can't do 100 things, but maybe you can do 5 or 3. What should I spend my time on?
Yeah, so absolutely.
How do you approach that now? Is this still like, is combine still something you do?
It's so interesting. So the approach of that, I'm reminded actually, and gosh, this is guess going to be a trip down amnesia lane here, but the back in when I was doing my doctoral work, I said I wanted to change pre-participation physicals, and I wanted a test battery that would predict injury, and I wanted to do 10 tests that would be combined together, that you can kind of do this. And that's where it started for me. And I still remember my research professor, Dr. Brown, he said, oh, that's really, really cool. He's like, what are you envisioning? I'm like, something like the Berg balance test, but for athletics. Okay. So test multiple domains and stuff like that. And he's like, that's really, really awesome. He's like, I got one question for you. I said, okay, I'm all ears. Do you want to graduate? And I'm like, absolutely. This is my number one thing. I want to graduate. He's like, well, do you know how long it took Berg to validate the Berg balance test? I don't know. I haven't talked to him. And it might even be her. I don't even know. But and he said 10 years.
Wow.
And I said, well, okay, no, I want to graduate. He's like, okay, well, choose one test. Choose what you think the most important is. And so that's where, again, I got into balance, but there's so many other things that go into it. Interestingly, you say that one of the things when we're looking at combine testing or pre-participation physical testing, I've got 4 boys. So my guiding principle in everything we do is, what would I want done to or for my boys if they were in this scenario, whether they're at a Major League Baseball combine, an NHL combine, or a high school pre-participation physical? What would I want done for them?
Yeah. Is there a test, if you had to pick one, for, let's go with baseball, because that's a sport that you were, if you could only do one, what would it be?
It would actually, I used to hate this game. Like I would get frustrated when people would ask this question, because I was like, oh, that's just a stupid question, because there's not just one, all this kind of stuff. But what's interesting about that question, now I've come to love that question, because what it does is it helps us prioritize. And you said it earlier, we can't do 100.
Right.
So, but, can we do 10? Well, if we can do 10, what if we can only do 5? Well, what if we can only do 2? Right. And I would always I'm like, you've got to do more than one. But what it does for me is it does prioritize. So if I were to say for a baseball player, it would be lumbar locked thoracic rotation.
Okay.
Okay, so you're on your hands and knees, lumbar spine full like child's pose position, and rotating just the T spine. To me, that would be the number one thing I would look at.
Because that what reveals a lot. Like, what does it show you? What?
So it's the foundation. So we kind of think of, okay, we've got a lot of shoulder and elbow injuries and things like that, and we know certain range of motion is related to injury and performance, and we know that having certain strength and things like that. But the foundation of being able to move that shoulder girdle in the way it needs to be, if thoracic mobility and stability is not there,
That's where
you can do everything you want to the shoulder, and it's really not going to matter. So that it's kind of foundational. And then from there I go, okay, well, actually, and this is all research based too, but then I would go to hip range of motion and ankle dorsiflexion, and then I would look at the shoulder.
yeah.
Right. So it kind of gives you also a priority of action as well.
Yeah, gives you sort of a paradigm to look, or a step by step or standard operating procedure to look at it.
For sure.
Yeah, another area in our profession gets talked about a lot, and how fast athletes can come back from injury. So return to sport testing, the importance of it really can't be overstated, right? So it and there's really no perfect. But what key elements do you think should be included in return to sport testing? I feel like these two things are crossing over. One is
They
trying to
do.
prevent, one is trying to prevent again or get back to optimal performance.
Well,
So
and
what
that's
do
you
you
make a
think?
great question, or a great point there when we talk about performance. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned probably in my first 10 years of my career is no one cares about injury prevention.
Hmm,
I was the only one, it seemed. I was the only one that cared about injury prevention. No patients, no coaches, no athletes really cared about prevention. They care about performance. And there's some great research that came out saying, when they surveyed coaches and players about the importance of doing things for performance and the importance of doing things for prevention, they said they valued both of those equally,
right.
performance and prevention. They valued them both equally. But when it came to acting on something, they acted on performance, but they didn't act on prevention. And so, yeah, so I think the interesting thing is what I've come to find out too is the same things that help prevent injuries are also the same things that unlock in baseball, unlock velo. They're two sides of the same coin. So yeah, as far as return to sport testing, I think number one, we're not doing it enough. And if we're doing it, it's very incomplete. And return to sport testing to me starts actually day one with rehab, of talking to the patient about, like, hey, this is the goalpost that we're going for. And these are the milestones that we're going to hit along the way, so that we're setting the stage up for success, rather than saying, oh, we're 2 weeks away and we're going to do a return to sport test. Well, now I mean, that's just like a pop quiz. I mean, that's not fair. So we got to get that buy-in early, and it actually needs to span the entire continuum. So it literally starts at range of motion. I think we sometimes forget that. I'm big in movement and things like that, but it's range of motion and strength are important. And then a lot of times we skip all the way to like hop testing. Again, hop testing is important. Drop, jump, landing testing is important, but we forget about that middle, that transition of range of motion to strength. Can I use range of motion and strength with movement? Can I use it in balance? Can I use it dynamically? And then can we objectively test these things in, I don't think we're using dynamometry enough. Back in the 90s, we used it all the time. And now it's coming back into favor. Like, hey, if you're not testing,
Right, you're guessing.
with you're just guessing. And so, yeah, it's being really systematic in that entire process, hitting the entire continuum, but really knowing what that roadmap is right at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's just good fundamental communication principles.
It really is. I mean, and as I tell you, I've really taken a deep dive into strength and conditioning over the past 10 years. And, it seems simplistic, but talking with, those great strength coaches, they say, well, we look at what do we want the player to be able to do if we're talking in the NFL, what do we want them to do at the most important time of the year? Like, so if we're looking at playoffs and Super Bowl, where do they need to be?
Right.
And then we literally work backward every single week, every single day from there until what day it is today. And we know then, therefore, where do they need to be at each one of these times? And I don't know that we do that enough in rehabilitation. And
Yeah.
plus, like you said, it's the foundation of communication. You got to get that buy-in. Like what does the soccer player want to do? What do they care about? What is their, hey, back to a question you asked me is like, oh, if you could, wave a magic wand. That's a great question for a player,
Yeah.
by the way. If you can wave a magic wand, when you're done with this, what would you as a soccer player, a volleyball player, or whatever, what would it look like for you? What could you do? What would you be able to do? And they'll say things like, "Well, I wish I could jump, 4 inches higher, 6 inches higher, and put on 15 pounds." Oh, cool. Well, why don't we try to do that in this process starting today?
Right. And here's how we'll do that. Because
Yeah.
to add 15 inches, we got to add 5. To add 5, here's what we
Right.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
A
Exactly.
phrase that you've used is testing to change the world. What does that mean?
I think it's clickbait. That's all it is. No, the
Clickbait is a hold on a second. Clickbait is only bad when the thing that you're getting to click is bad, and bad
oh,
is
I see. Okay. So bait is good, right? Yeah. I
well,
mean,
bait is can I pique your interest to
yeah.
want
Well, I
to
get my dog
please
to do a lot of different things because of a treat.
right, right. But we're big dumb animals, so we're the same way.
We're the same way. So, testing to change the world to me means that regardless of where we're at, if we're not being systematic and objective in our return to sport decision making, in our pre-participation decision making, and then also our performance training. Right. So, what does performance training look like? Well, what should you be working on? And what should you be improving? And how do you know that if someone tells you that they want 4 inches on their vertical jump, that's great. Does that mean you do plyometrics? Well, it may, but it actually may be, what if they're lacking ankle dorsiflexion range of motion? You're going to be really hampered in what you can do. I mean, and I just look at it as a simple example. And I know I've gotten permission from one of my sons to share this. Is he wanted to increase his vertical jump and be able to dunk a basketball when he was a freshman. Okay, and he tells me this right in his spring of 8th grade. He's like, I want to be able to dunk a basketball. I'm like, okay, well, you're 5'11", you have my genetics, and okay, but as like he's like, would you design a program for me? Again, you want to talk about buy-in? He's asking. Okay,
Came to you
so
first, yeah.
yep. And so but what's interesting about it is he had been training for a few years with really fundamental strength training, movement training. His body had been tested multiple times. So he had this great foundation and then had a great strength foundation. We increased that. We did some very, very targeted body weight and body work exercises and combined that with a systematic plyometric program. He gained 6 inches in that 7 months and met his goal. Now that only happens. And people would look at it, they're like, oh, well, it was the jump training that you did. That's just the icing on the cake.
And
That's just what finally tips it over.
it's the thing you can see, but doesn't
Yeah.
mean it. It's that tip of the iceberg that's exposed, and not all the
Right.
I used to love back in my radio days, which I sound like I'm 100
You're
years.
still, yeah, aren't you still in your radio days?
Yeah, I don't radios are the internet now, so yeah.
Right.
But I would love talking to a band that maybe I had been following for a while before they were cool, right? And now I
Mhm.
get a chance to interview them maybe after like their first big song or album has popped or their big tour. And I would always do this. It would hurt me because I'd have to talk to them before the interview. But I didn't want to ruin that real good to meet you.
Yeah,
when
that
we're live.
moment. Yeah, right.
A lot of times I would say, I'm on purpose ignoring you until we go live. I'm dying to talk to you, but I'm not making eye contact because I know me. I'm going to just start talking. And my favorite go-to question in a situation like this, which is I would start by introducing the band, and I would say, and I'm welcoming Overnight Success, insert band name here. And I would love to watch their reaction. And then I'd hold, and then I'd say, we both know that there were a lot of overnights. And they'd finally I would love to watch their shoulders drop, and they're like, okay, he gets it.
Oh, he gets it, right? He understands that there's a little bit more than meets the eye.
And then I'd go back and go like, do you think, is this what it feels like? You're having tremendous success right now. You and I both know. I want everybody else to know that it was because of the dorsiflexion training that you did. It was because of the strength training you did. How's it feel now? And then you get a great answer because
It's so cool. Yeah, and even him at 15 is it's just like he recognizes that, and he wants to be able to have people ask him the question of how,
How'd you do?
which and it's just like, oh, could you give me the exercises you can do? It's like, okay, well, and he jokingly will say, he's like, if everybody ever asks how I did it, he's like, I had to spend like 10 years doing goblet squats. Like it was the goblet squats that, it was the 10 years of goblet squats that finally,
Yeah.
kicked in.
People want to know the fastest way to get the thing that they
Yeah.
want. And that's where I forget who had said it. They said, really great long term planning for your career, your company is write down the 10 things you want to accomplish in the next 10 years. Now cross out 7 of them. Don't
Yeah.
do anything revolving
Right.
around 7. And then out of the 3 that are left, circle 1. And you can't, and that's the one you have to start with. And you cannot move to the other 2 until you have 100% completed that one.
Oh, I love that.
It sounds like your son did that, which is like, I want to
It
do all
it
these
is.
things, but I have
Yeah, it is. It's, what's interesting about it, though, the one thing I wanna caution maybe your listeners on this is, so we certainly started with movement and foundational things and getting his push-up and his pull-up to be outstanding and making sure he had all his movement in place. But at the same time, he was doing, kettlebell deadlifts and squats and lunges and split squats, and so he was, and those weights went from, he's just holding the 18 pounder all the way getting up to now he's double racked at 52s on each side. Now we're going to go into the barbell,
Yeah.
and so it's almost like you would take those top 3 things and just systematically go with them and not rush the process. But with that said, again, if you're systematic about it, someone might come into me as an 18-year-old and they may have none of that process done,
Right.
half of that process done,
Right.
95% of that process done. And that's my job as a professional, is to figure that out.
Yeah. So I was going to ask this next question, but I feel like we've been talking about it. The question was going to be something along the lines of, how can the principles of working with athletes, because as you mentioned in your intro, working with athletes at the highest level, how can the principles of elite sport testing or physical therapy or training be adapted to benefit the quote everyday patient, people like Jimmy, in physical therapy and rehabilitation settings? But it sounds like the big things are the small things.
It is. And then that's, and it's actually my passion. It's what I go around doing, is like, I really want to bring what is done in professional sports and make it accessible to the junior high school athlete, make it accessible to the physical therapist, to the athletic trainer, to the strength coach, who are, working with the mere mortals at the high school level, and take this information and go, all right, well, it always seems so like far out for me, or so distant, unachievable, because there was so much. And it's just like, man, if the places that do it right focus on the fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
and if you look at anybody, like you look at Steph Curry, what does he do? Right? 500 shots a day.
Yeah.
500 shots a day, and that's, it's, Jordan said the same thing. If you, when you go and watch, Major League Baseball players, they're hitting off the tee. The same thing that's done, at 6 years old as a training device is still grooving in the swing, after they've taken tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of swings.
Yeah.
And so it is these same fundamentals. It's really, hey, let's set a movement baseline. Let's look at their movement, make sure that that we develop their movement, that we correct anything that's not doing well, develop their strength, develop their body weight competency, develop load competency, and let's do that quickly.
We're going to do something called 60-second PT. Are you ready to do 60-second PT?
Sure, why not?
We're going to rapid fire questions, just like hitting off a tee. We're just going to do it over
Okay.
and over. And
So
over.
do I have 60 seconds to answer, or you're going to ask all these questions in 60 seconds?
The second one, the harder one. So
Wow.
the
See, I'm
faster
kind
you
of,
answer, the more questions you get.
so if I'm in a practical situation, I'm only wanting one question. So I'm just going to, wax poetic for a half hour here.
Smart. But this one is scored as a whole. So you ready to?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Here we go. First up, define physical therapy in just 3 words.
Systematic testing and intervention.
Love it. What's the most challenging part of your job?
Communication.
What's the most rewarding part of your job?
Seeing the athlete or patient achieve their goal. Smile.
What's a myth about physical therapy that you often encounter?
Oh gosh, that it's I don't know if it's a myth or if it's a truth that everyone gets the same thing, and people come in and they have knee pain, they get the same exercises. Unfortunately, that is a myth of what it shouldn't be, but unfortunately, all too often it is.
What's a common mistake new physical therapists make?
That they don't give themselves grace to be able to learn and make mistakes. Like it is I'm wrong. I say all this time, I'm wrong all the time. I just don't stay there.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. I like that. What's a trend in the profession that excites you the most?
I think it's a micro trend. So it's a trend before the trend. I think we are going to see a new generation of physical therapists who are even more caring and compassionate and will design careers that they love, that they're serving a lot of people.
Love that. What's a book every PT should read?
Never Split the Difference by
Oh
Chris
my
Voss.
gosh, can't love that enough. It's a great communication book.
His masterclass is amazing too.
I've got to take that. He's just a smart guy. What's the most underrated skill in physical therapy?
Communication.
And what's a piece of advice you wish you'd been given at the start of your own career?
Find a community, find a group of people who are passionate in the area that you're passionate, and run with them.
Love it. All right, you're off the hot seat. That was 60-second PT powered by ATI
Man.
Physical Therapy. Find them online at atipt.com. Maybe jumpstart your career with them. Let's see. Oh, we're also going to play a game called Overrated, Underrated. I'm going to give you an idea that has to do with you and your background and your work, and you tell me whether you think that thing is overrated or underrated. You've seen it on ESPN. Now we're doing it with Phil.
All right.
Overrated, underrated, high-tech equipment in athletic performance testing. Is it
Overrated.
overrated?
Overrated.
Why?
Because baseball, let's use baseball as an example, has literally millions of data points now. And it's not, I was talking about this when they're asking, when I go in and consult with a team, they're like, what do you look at? And I'm like, you'd be kind of surprised. The most successful teams I've worked with, I look at about 25 things.
Really?
And it's that simple. And almost none of it involves technology.
Yeah. I've said this before too. KPIs can only be key if there's a few of them. If you have
Right.
a million keys, that's a really bad lock. So
Absolutely. But you wouldn't believe the number of players that you go in and, have great people working with them, and you go in and they're having trouble with their shoulder and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, their dorsiflexion's out, and so of course you've been having trouble with this. You go and you fix, and they're like, man, this is the best I felt in 2 years. You're like, well, I'm not that smart. I just didn't miss simple stuff.
Right, the basic stuff. Second, overrated, underrated, the importance of mental health in return to sport assessments. Overrated or underrated?
Wow. So it's underrated, but it's misappropriated, I will say, actually. And so here's the thing. So I believe there is definitely a cognitive, psychological, mental health component that is essential in return to sport. And you need to start working on it day one. With that said, though, I think a lot of the research is pointing toward, we have this fear of movement and kinesiophobia and all this kind of stuff. We need to be testing for that. But what I found is that actually people's fear of movement or fear of re-injury is actually pretty founded in the fact that they don't have all the range of motion, strength, movement competency, and high-level athleticism competency, so that their fear is actually well-founded. So unless we're doing systematic testing that we've tested all the domains and know they have competency, now it's almost more of a diagnosis of exclusion, right? So they have competency of it here. They still have a high fear avoidance. They still have, their Tampa or whatever is high. Well, this is defined therefore as a psychological thing that needs to really be further assessed, by a professional. But if they have physical limitations on the table, and you can only know that if you've actually systematically and robustly tested that, they're probably right.
Yeah. So trust in that.
Yeah.
All right. Final question, overrated, underrated. The impact of nutrition on recovery and testing outcomes. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. And I'll put the same thing in the same category. Nutrition, sleep. I have the fortune of working one of the guy who makes what I call the fastest people in the world faster. He works with the Olympic track and field team. They've won the most gold medals over the past 3 Olympics than they've ever won. And I asked him. We did a baseball sprint speed program, and we're just doing a little Q&A, and I said, "What if you could give advice to the high schooler? What would it be to make yourself faster?" And he's like, "Oh, that's easy. No problem." And I'm thinking like, okay, it's going to be an exercise. It's going to be a train. Make sure you're doing that. He's like, "Get more sleep." Wow. Okay, here we go.
I mean, the smarter we get, we keep turning over rocks, and this is not to knock research. We should continue to research things to become smarter. We keep researching things and finding simple answers and going, yes, but isn't it more complicated than
right? Isn't it? Well, again, I've made a full career out of that. Like,
Right.
it's we do this. You talk about combine testing. It's like we can test a million things, and we can actually test it with ridiculous technology.
Right.
When do we use technology? When do we not? When is it important? When is it not? What is simple? What is complex? And what is most important?
Yeah. And that's the K in KPIs. All right. You're off the hot seat. That's overrated, underrated. Brought to you by our friends from the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy with their new current concepts in the 5th edition. If you're thinking about getting that OCS or taking that exam or elevating your career, it's a great roadmap to take you from wherever you are to the beginning of that examination. So find them online at orthopt.org. Phil, last thing we do on the show is called the parting shot.
This is the parting shot.
Parting shot, no pressure. There's music in the background and everything. What's your mic drop moment? What's your soapbox statement? What would you want to leave with the audience today with your parting shot?
Oh, it's clearly make sure you are testing every domain in whether it's return to sport or pre-participation physical. It's range of motion, strength, objective movement, dynamic balance, all the way through all the little domains of performance.
Yeah. We'll put it in the show notes as well, but I wanted to make sure people could see your website, whether they're professionals or athletes, right? For 2 reasons. Number 1, you give out good information. Number 2, you give out really good information that is simple to understand, and you give it away well. I'm not saying run to Phil's website right now, which is philplisky.com, and copy everything, because that would be a mistake. What I'm saying is look at what he's doing and how he's doing it. I mean, coming from a guy with a communications background, I'm like, look at all these things he's doing and how he's doing these things, and then say, how do I put my spin on it? What am I helping in my local community? I think this is the only way that we improve as a profession. We can improve as societies.
Well, I'm honored. I appreciate that, because I think that goes back to communication and behavior change, right? I mean, our whole goal as professionals is to get behavior change, and whether it's behavior change in our patients or behavior change in our colleagues, and that comes back to communication.
I agree. Phil, appreciate the time and for sharing what you know.
Fantastic. It was great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. They say the best conversations happen at happy hour. Thanks for coming to ours.